Hi everyone, this is CS Professor Pam with Jumpstart Code, continuing our study of CSS. We are working through the material in Interneting is Hard. We are on the chapter Hello CSS, and what we have done in the first video was to talk about how to link our CSS page to our HTML. So what we're working with right now is a project that has 3 files. We have our main HTML page here, and all this content is in the lesson that you can pull out of the Interneting is Hard document. We have a dummy page that we really haven't worked with yet, and we have a CSS page that we've only just started learning about how to set the text color and the background color. And this CSS page is connected to your HTML using this link element, which is in the meta section. We talked about in the last lesson these hex values for colors, and I wanted to show you a site that you can go on if you're looking for a certain color and want to know the hex value for it. This site is rgbacolorpicker.com. And for example, if I want this shade of blue, if I click on a color there, then it will give me that hex value, right? If I take this hex value now and let's change my color, my text color to that, then we will see. Let's make sure I saved and we refresh. So let's go back over here again. What was the color that I have? Let me just double check. 1800FF. I forgot the hashtag, right? So it's very easy to make these little syntax mistakes. And when you do, you have to just go back and double check your syntax. Now I'm seeing the blue color that I selected there, right? So if you want a color and you want to know what's the hex value for that color, there's several sites like this. You can just Google hex color picker and you will find something like that. So let's go on and talk about some additional things that we can style. So I'm going to take our color here back to our background color of gray, dark gray, which is 414141. Let me double check. And yes. All right. So now we're here. All right. So we can change the font size. So for example, I've got an H1 over here, and there's going to be a default size to your headers based on the browser. But if I want to change that size, I can. So here you can see we can have a different selector. I'm selecting the H1 elements. That would apply to any H1 element on this page. And I'm changing the font size to 36 pixels, right? So there's a number of different sizing units. We're going to talk about those in a second, but let's start with this. So I'm going to add another rule. Each one of these things that I'm creating here is a CSS rule. And for this one, I'm going to assign the font size, right? So here's the font size that we had. I want to try to set this up so we can see the change as I save this file. So if I save all, right? Do you see my font size on my H1 became a little bigger here, right? So you can override whatever the defaults are and make changes. If I want to change my H2 sizing, I could do that. And remember, I could choose to make the H2s bigger than the H1, but that would not be in keeping with, what we should do when we are doing our page. So if I say H2, notice each time I have a new rule, a new selector, it needs its own set of curly brackets. And we're going to change the font size to 28 pixels for this. So I have font size 28 pixels. And we will save all. And we see a different font size here, right? Now, in terms of units of measurement, there's a lot of units you can use, but the most common ones are px for pixel and em, which you just pronounce as m. And m allows you to set a size relative to some base font. So if I have a base size of 12 pixels, for example, then 1 em would represent 12 pixels. 2 em would be double the size, so that would be 24 pixels. 1.6 is a little bit in between, right? So em gives you a relative sizing based on whatever is the base font size. So for example, let's make the base font of our body 18 pixels. So I'm going to go in here and we say font size 18 pixels. Now you'll notice, even though I'm applying something to the body there, that is not going to change everything to 18 pixels because this H1 selector is more specific, and so it overrides. So anything on the body that is not an H1, for example, these paragraphs here, and my lists will be 18 pixels, right? Just to show you, let's just change it to 12 so we can see a difference here. So you see there, everything on the page, with the exception of the H1 and H2, because they have rules that are more specific, that override that, okay? So that is my base size, and I could decide that I want my headers to always be twice as big, my H1s and my H2s to be 1.6. This will allow us to have what's called responsive design, which we will learn about in future lessons, so that when you size your page, things size proportionally, right? Because you really don't want to commonly set hard-coded pixel sizes, because if someone's on a phone, for example, or a smaller tablet or a bigger screen, that you want things to look nice on different screen sizes. And so you need to do some proportional sizing, right? So you'll see here, for example, this was 1.6. If I make this 1 for the H2, then now you can see that the H2s are the same as the paragraph because that's the base size, right? 18 pixels, and my H2 is 1 times that base size, so it's 18 pixels. But if I make it 1.6, then now it is going to be proportionally bigger. Okay, so EMs are a really good unit to use if you want to scale things. Suppose I want to assign a certain font family to all of my headings, right? Well, since I have H1s and H2s, then I would think that I'd need to make separate rules, but we don't. We can assign the same attribute to multiple things by putting a set of selectors together. So if I do a rule like this, then I'm saying all of the H elements on my page, whether I'm using them or not right now, but if you run into any of these, notice they're all separated by commas, then I want you to use a font family. And typically you provide multiple choices here because it can depend on your browser which font is actually available. So it's going to look for a Helvetica font. If it can't find that, it's going to use Arial. If it can't find that, it's just going to use whatever is the sans serif font, which means the font that doesn't have sort of the little curly lines associated with it. So let's save this, and you see here that my headers now, this is a sans serif font, right? They don't have the little curly lines as the other fonts do to here, okay? We do that again by specifying different font families. And actually nowadays there are so many fonts available online. There's Google fonts available, so we can do another whole lesson about selecting fonts. All right, couple more things here. Let's look at our lists. So there are ways that we can change or control what I want my list to look like. So for an unordered list, the default is to have these bullets. For an ordered list, the default is to have numbers, but I can change that with a property called list style type, right? So let's take this rule, add it here into my page. So I'm just going to do, first I'm just going to do the unordered list, so we can see what the change is here. So if I save this, you see my unordered list now is using this circle instead of the default, which is the bullet. And if I want to make a rule for my ordered list, and I want to show you guys something here. You see, this is also a benefit of using a smart editor. If I don't see this attribute come out in red, then probably I have a typo there, okay? So if you really pay attention to your colors, that can help you. And also, it will give you what some of the options are. So if I want to say lower Roman here, then we're going to see the change down here when I save this. Right? You see my list down here is now using lowercase Roman numerals. All right. So there are a number of ways. A lot of times when we use unordered lists to set up navigation menus. And so sometimes you actually don't want the bullets at all. You don't want to see any. And so we could change, we could say list style type of none. And you see here that removes the little styling at all. So you have complete control over how you want this to do. All right, now, so let's talk about reusable style sheets. So, you know, I've got two pages here. I've got this page, and then I have a link to another page. But right now, when I go to this page, it doesn't look like it's all part of the same website, right? It doesn't have the same styling associated with it. So typically you want all the pages in your website to have the same look and feel. So what we can do is assign this same style sheet that I have here. So over in my Hello CSS, if I copy this same link here, and let's go put it in the other page, then now, if I save all, you see, this page now has the same look, okay? So that's a big benefit to using style sheets and what's called separation of concerns. So we've got the HTML files that have the content, but then a separate styles file that specifies the styling for all the pages. So you usually have a style sheet that you apply to the entire site. And sometimes you might then want to have more specific styling on certain sheets. We'll get to that just a little bit later in this particular lesson. All right, let's talk about just a few more things in terms of our anchor. So you notice over here, there's a link, and we can specify what happens on our link, right? Because right now, my link has this sort of underline style that is associated with it. But if I go to my style sheet here, and I'm going to add a rule for my A tags, right? So look at what happened. This link, the underline that was there, goes away. I can still tell that this is a link. It's got a different color associated with it, but we can't see that, right? So that is another thing that you can control. Again, there are so many properties that you can control. Nobody memorizes them all. It is very common to have to go look up certain syntax and certain properties in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. Let's talk about aligning text. So I've got a paragraph on here. We probably won't see this very easily unless we put some more text, but let's try it. So let's go into here. Let's add a rule for our paragraphs. Text align. And if right now the default is left aligned, but if I do right align, do you see how the text moved over to line up on the right side of the page, right? So you get to control that. And you might be wondering right now, suppose you have different paragraphs and some you want left aligned and some you want right aligned. Well, we're going to learn a lot of other ways to select things on a page. So we're not forced to apply the exact same styling to every single paragraph on our page. There's ways to customize. So we have also right alignment, center alignment, or justifying. All right, and let's kind of wrap up here with font weights. So that's the boldness of your text. Now, we've already learned how to use strong to specify bold text. But for example here, headings are typically in a stronger font like that, right? I'm going to change this back to left. But if I want my headings not to be bold, there's a property called font weight, and I can specify normal. So I'm going to go into all of my headings here and specify a font weight of normal. And let's save. Right? So you see the change there? Then the sizing is still there, but it doesn't have the bold associated with it. It has a normal font weight. Okay? We do know that, you can specify EM and strong. Strong is usually bold and EM is italicized, and you could redefine them if you want to, but that would not be a good thing to do. Okay? All right, so that's a good little section of material that we've covered here. We've talked about some additional properties, and again, nobody's going to memorize them all, but right now we're focusing on things like text color, background color. We could apply a background image. That's another thing that we can do on a web page. We've talked about fonts and font sizes, font weights, and we've talked a little bit about how to style our unordered and ordered lists, and our links, and also aligning text. All right. So the best way that you learn this stuff is you practice it. So I hope you will continue to just sort of play around with this document and practice and see what you can do.